Hey, Middle Earthians. Maybe you're Middle Earthians, or maybe you're just normal people, like your humble host. Yes, this is another Rings of Power review. This is for part 2 of season 1, reviewing the second half of this, might I dare say it, wonderful experience that many of us have shared together over the past 6 to 7 weeks. And while you might be thinking, is that Middle Earth memorabilia in the background just for this video? Oh. Is it just for this video? That is still to be determined. That is for you to know and me to figure out why my stand is crooked. This is not really my stand, this is my roommate's stand. But alas, we are alive and we are thriving. So without further ado, this is my season 1 part 2 review of Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings of Power. This was by far my favorite half of the season. So much more action, so much more intrigue. We had a lot more big consequential reveals from some of our new characters coming in here in the second half. And we also had some actual character development for Galadriel. We had some character development for Elrond, for Durin. Unfortunately not for our guy Gil-galad. It's pronounced Gil-galad in Tolkien's works, not Gil-galad, which I thought it was. Am I looking at you, Galad Damodred from The Wheel of Time? No, I'm not. I'm looking at you, High King Gil-galad. I almost said it again. Wow, I'm a dunce. But I really did think this half of the season was a lot better than the initial half. You got some layered, nuanced reasoning behind why the orcs are attacking the Southlands, why this elf-seeming guy who's gone dark is seeming to be evil. And it was not something previously explored in any Tolkien work or project, including Peter Jackson's trilogy. Also, you got some really cool origins for one of the most iconic places in all of Middle-earth, which that's a semi-spoiler. However, it was still cool to see regardless, and I loved it. Loved it. And not to mention, the final episode, while it did have its disappointments, it was cool to finally see the Rings of Power begin to be forged, because after all, that is the name of this prestige television show. So, if you have an issue with that particular plot point, sorry about it, because it ain't going nowhere. The new mythology the show has crafted around certain things has been a point of contention for many fans, but I would like to challenge that and say Tolkien's writings are deliberately obscure, because in his letters, I have not read all of his letters, but I intend to one day, but I've heard many podcasters, I've read a lot about the letters. He was always at work with his crowning jewel that is Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings story. He always was coming back, making changes to this garden, pruning things, planting seeds for future creators to play in his sandbox, if you will. And one of the coolest things that he did was he added some depth to some of our villains, some of our heroes, and some of our just normal layfolk. He left some things intentionally, I hate that word, vague for a reason. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to go into detail with that. I thought the origin story and mythology for one certain thing really played well into the plot of the overall season. And I enjoyed that a lot. But also to see how Galadriel grew as a character throughout this season was sublime. Yeah, I didn't have the same level of character development as, say, House of the Dragon has enjoyed, but she did experience growth along the way. The changing of the timelines I haven't really had the biggest issue with. I know that'll upset some book purists, but the hardest thing to do with source material around the Second Age in particular has to do with the fact that Tolkien literally bullet pointed a list of events that happened over a period of 3,400 years. So it's really hard to actually flesh those events out and put layers and nuance on them, which I think this show is attempting to do and is attempting with a degree of success. But only time will tell if those seeds will actually bear fruit, as The Stranger does for the Harfoots, mild spoiler, or if those fruits will rot and it'll fall apart at the end like our dearly beloved Game of Thrones did. Which, if you haven't seen my most recent Hot Take Tuesday, Game of Thrones is still rewatchable even after 8 seasons. I stand by that statement. One last positive before I jump into some of the negatives of the show. Tolkien's faith has definitely been on display throughout these 8 episodes and even in this back half. And a lot of the themes of protecting nature and shepherding nature and wanting to create, wanting to subdue in a peaceful way and rule in a peaceful way are on display here, and that I think is awesome. That was on display in Galadriel's mirror scene in Fellowship, in both the book and the movie. And I think that's been in the show's favor, honestly. You see that she's flawed. She's very flawed. There is depth to her character. There are layers to her character. And I think the opening dialogue that she had with Finrod actually informs a lot of her failures and informs a lot of her character growth. Now, jumping into some of the negatives, I would say this season was way too rushed. This is a similar complaint I have to the first season of The Wheel of Time. It was way too rushed. Amazon Studios needs to give us more episodes per season to flesh out some of these characters. The pacing was better this back half, but it was still going at breakneck speed. Not to mention, there were some writing missteps that I think could have been really avoided if they had thought through some of the characters. And also the canon they're trying to set up here just is a little confusing at points. I.e., the orcs and how they travel. I'm sorry that's a spoiler, but if you want to watch the show, I highly recommend it and you'll find out what I'm talking about. There are some changes to book canon that, again, are head-scratching, which I'm not a fan of. But again, time will tell if they actually pan out to be anything significant, or if the Tolkien estate will give Amazon a little bit more liberty to explore some of Tolkien's other properties, Silmarillion, or Children of Húrin, or Beren and Luthien, so on and so forth. We don't know. We just don't know. This show could use also some key distinguishing features that would separate it in a good way from Peter Jackson's Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogies. Because right now it feels kind of like it's retreading old ground, trying to lay Easter eggs in our path and pay us fan service where we really don't need it. We just want to watch the show and get some character development and get some new content in Middle-earth. Right now, it feels like it's heading towards a familiar place, which I'm okay with, but I want it to become its own thing so that it stands on its own 2 feet and actually stands the test of time. And right now, I wouldn't say the show, while it is entertaining and really enjoyable, does not stand the test of time. Despite my critiques and despite my criticisms, this season was really good. It was not great, but it was really good. So I give the back half of season 1 of The Rings of Power an 8.1 out of 10. There's a lot of praise to be given for the accomplishments that Amazon has been succeeding with on this show. They're fleshing out Tolkien's appendices. They're giving layers and nuance to some rather one-dimensional characters, which I think is important, because if you're going to adapt a timeless work like this, it does have to somewhat reflect how stories are being told in our contemporary age. Not to mention, the visuals are stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. Unfortunately, they are moving back to the UK for production on season 2 and future seasons after that. So the wonder of New Zealand will unfortunately have to be diminished to probably a bunch of green screens, which I'm not a fan of. But if you can make it the green screens and computer generated imagery and even scenes in the volume look good, I'm okay with that, because I'll be immersed in the world regardless. An overall season ranking, I would give this slightly above the back half of season 2, in 8.3 out of 10. So it's almost great. It's still missing a few of the really key elements that it would take to make this show timeless and stand on its own 2 feet, but also take us into new uncharted territory that will truly expand the world of Middle-earth and the wonder that has inspired so many generations. Not that it's not doing that, it could just do more. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, you need to remember,
driver picks the music,
shotgun shuts.